Apocalypse Prize has been instituted to present a traditional way of making contemporary religious art. This prize will be awarded to the participating artist who is best able to use medieval principles of composition in his own work. I am now going to present the most basic of these principles to you. In part 2 of this video, we will look together at studies of medieval paintings from the Apocalypse, and I will show you how to identify and interpret the analogies of which they are composed. We have confined the subject matter of this competition to themes taken from the Apocalypse of St. John, because we believe this holy book offers artists an unparalleled opportunity for imaginative representation. The images described here are metaphors combined in an allegory. Through this means, not the thing, but the spiritual meaning of things is revealed. The Apocalypse was profusely illuminated by many different artists throughout the Middle Ages. Here the poetic analogies of the text are carried over into the paintings without interpretation, but as images simply. An image is a suitable representation of a certain person or thing if it depicts the descriptive characteristics of it that are written in the text. In the Apocalypse, Satan is described as a red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. But these few details are not enough to complete the image. The rest is left to the artist's imagination. And this great freedom results in remarkable variations of the same subject. Medieval paintings are a kind of theatrical representation of reality. They are like a painted play performed on the stage of the artist's picture plane, but with very special and wondrous features capable of presenting all at once not only this world and the next world, but an involvement of the entire cosmos. The theater of medieval art is a very different place than the world presented to us by photographs and the representational paintings of the last 500 years. We can see deeply into this picture from the foreground to the horizon line in the very far distance. But in medieval art, the horizon is kept very close to the foreground and often merges with it. This is accomplished either by pitching the picture plane very high, as if the ground rises in a steep incline above the viewer of the picture. Here we see a cross-section of the study showing the actual location of its figures on the rising plane. Alternatively, the horizon is brought down to the lowest possible level, providing only enough earth for the character to stand on. The nearness of the horizon is an analogy to the intimacy of heaven and earth in the Christian world. It tells us that the spiritual world, analogous to the sky, is never very far away. Since the time of the Renaissance, the picture frame has represented a kind of window through which one may see just one scene, shown as it might appear frozen in one particular instant. And of course, this cross-section of the time continuum is the essence of photography. These compositions of things are related to each other by time and space, that is, their immediate location at a given time. They are organized on a physical principle called one-point perspective and determined by a pictorial device called the vanishing point. By this system, all things are seen to grow smaller as they become more distant, and at last vanish into the ever-receding horizon. This space-time ordering principle of the here and now perfectly illustrates the materialist philosophy that has largely shaped our contemporary culture. The Christian cosmos of medieval art is much larger than this, and it is not confined by either space or time, nor is it limited by its frame. And most importantly, there is no vanishing point at all. Yet the entire hierarchy of heaven and earth are found in their proper places here. Something so intellectually complex can only be visualized analogically, that is, by substituting for each subject something which is like it in significant respects, and yet much more simple. The medieval artist conceived of his picture plane as a stage, familiar in form to the facade of a building, with many stories and wings, all open to the audience. Perhaps he drew his idea initially from the ancient Greek and Roman theaters, ruins of which can still be seen today. The stage of these amphitheaters was a large, shallow building facade of several floors with balconies and a rather narrow porch in the front. This facade had no interior, but served only as a backdrop through which actors could speak to each other from the various floors by standing on the balconies, and could enter and exit from its doors. A medieval painting is composed as if it were a facade constructed so as to represent locations for each separate state of being in the Christian cosmos. This building motif is very common in medieval paintings as a frame for the action of the painting. Often the actual building elements are shown only in remnant form, but the spatial concept of apartments within a facade remains. The floors or rooms of this building are analogous to the Christian hierarchy of existence within our cosmos, created and revealed by God. Each floor is the location of all those beings who participate with each other at the same level of being. And if a horizontal motif is chosen, a line of adjacent rooms or partitions will house the various realms of existence in play. Hell is at the bottom, and it lies beneath the earth, although it may be shown as a hell mouth on the earth and opening into the nether region. Above the earth is the sky with sun, moon, and stars. This is also the location of apparitions and visions. Above the natural sky is the heaven of the saints and angels. The eternity of God is a special apartment, which often extends above the topmost edge of the painting. All these regions are clearly separated from each other, and their boundaries are usually delimited by borders. The borders may be very simple and composed by some form of metonymy, that is, by one part which is characteristic of the ground standing for the whole of it. An example of this would be a cloud frill separating heaven from the sky, or a rolling border of rocks representing the earth. The number of floors or levels of existence shown in any single painting varies and depends upon the necessities of each story. But these do not exhaust the vocabulary of the artist to show other differences in states of being. An actor may be inside or outside the play. St. John is shown here in the margin because he is only watching the vision which appears inside the border and not participating in it. This little window through which St. John is looking carries the analogy of vision. Persons or events only indirectly associated to the story can be appendaged to the main painting in order to magnify or complete its meaning. Sometimes the border tells us as much of the story as the central image and leads directly into it. Surrounding borders may be laced with characters who have significant relations to the main characters in the painting. Or they may represent analogies suggesting the moral significance of the play. A modern play, opera, or ballet is divided into acts, and each act is limited, like the modern picture, by time and space. Many things may happen during one act, but they must all happen in a continuous sequence ruled by real time and all in the same place. This action would require many different pictures. Each medieval painting represents one complete act of a given play. But what is allowed to occur in this act is not limited by space and time. Everything that occurs in this one act of the play must be shown everywhere on the cosmic stage of the painting as if it happened all together at once. If a certain character must perform two separate actions, he will be shown in the picture twice. If two or more different actions support the meaning of the main event, all actions will be shown as if happening at the same time. By skillfully ordering each image in relation to the others, the meaning of the whole act is realized simultaneously. The difficulties inherent in ordering such complicated pictures gave rise to a system of devices based on analogy that both simplify and visually objectify the stories which are given artistic form. To understand the analogies of medieval art, we must first identify those things which have something extraordinary in the way they are represented. Things which seem to be altered in form or position or exaggerated in some other way from what we would expect to see in real life are signs of an intended analogy. This extraordinary quality is the key to a comparison the artist intends you to make between the figure and the spiritual significance of its part in the story. The extraordinary quality represents an analogy, a likeness to the invisible quality it represents. This giant woman represents a personification of wisdom. This illustration is taken from a book on that subject called The Consolation of Philosophy, written in the 6th century. Boethius, its author, is shown here associated with his prison, where he wrote his book. Because he was sentenced to death, the artist has placed him in a casket, which metaphorically represents the plight of a condemned man in a prison cell. Because of its visual nature, art is capable of carrying 3 different levels of analogy in the same painting and at the same time. On the first level, we must admit that all painting is, of its very essence, analogous. This is because the thing we see is not the real thing in the real world, but only a greatly simplified representation of it. We recognize the identity of the thing depicted because it looks like what it is supposed to represent, even though in a much simpler way. The artist has created a visual analog to the real person or thing. On the second level, we have the incorporation of linguistic analogies or metaphors from poetry, literature, or sacred scripture directly into the painting to be used as subject matter. In the Apocalypse, the writer describes in his book that he saw Christ as a lamb, and the artist then makes for us a picture of a lamb. The third level of analogy in painting is created by the artist uniquely and is the result of his manipulation of the composition of his picture in the service of the story. This is the level of analogy from which medieval art draws its distinctive style. There are many poetic tools proper to a painting which the artist has at his command and which can be used to create analogy. The first to consider is identity. This is the similarity the artist makes of his figure to the thing or person in the story it is meant to represent. Here only essential attributes are to be portrayed, but the beauty of the form is entirely at the discretion of the artist. Conversely, the artist may substitute another creature altogether for his subject by allegory, which is a special form of analogy. In composing his picture, the artist must decide where to place this figure within the universe of his painting. Because medieval paintings have an inside, an outside, and many levels of reality, the location of any figure tells the viewer a great deal about the figure's relationship to the story and the other figures. Is he outside the play? Or is he in it? Is he all the way in or only partially in? Does he cross barriers of realms within the universe? Is he going out? Is he being forced out? Is he drawing someone in? Gestures can be exaggerated to increase their significance. Vegetation and buildings are reduced to essentials. And the perspective of buildings can be distorted in the service of the story and to defeat any suggestion of receding distance. Because, as we said earlier, nothing in this spiritual world is very far from anything else. Extraordinary size, either too large or too small, show the rank of the figure related to the other figures in an analogical form. Patterns are used to reduce the complexities of nature by the analogy of the simplified pattern to the thing it represents. By studying the action of the characters in the story, they can be shown to be doing things which are simplifications of the things they actually do. We see here a painting representing Satan being imprisoned in hell. This image is not the portrayal of an act, but it is rather the analogy of an act. In order to express that Satan is not merely an inhabitant of hell, but a prisoner there, the hell mouth is shown as a kind of pillory by which the helpless Satan is held fast by his heads. Pictorial devices were handed down from generation to generation in the Middle Ages, and often we find analogical inventions used by several different artists in manuscripts of the Apocalypse with only slight variations. Originality, always delightful, was not essential to these works. The priorities of medieval art are balance, proportion, intelligibility, brevity, clarity, simplicity, fidelity, and beauty. Invention follows as a kind of coping strategy to integrate the elements of the story. When you apply to compete for the Apocalypse Prize on this website, we will send you a free booklet that discusses these and other tools of analogical composition in greater detail.